What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in to another BC Lions post-game report. And oh boy, was that one frustrating, ladies and gentlemen. But we're here, and we're going to talk about the BC Lions fall, and a very disappointing, as I mentioned, frustrating. You can use a lot of adjectives to describe this one. A stinker. The Lions, get out to the 14-3 lead of the 3-0 lead to the Argos there early on, as they were able to score in their very first drive of the game. Lions were able to march down, get up points on both their first drives to start the game, jump out to that 14-3 lead, and they give it up quicker than quicksand. Although quicksand, I think you sink fairly slow in it, so maybe that's not as quick as the name quite describes. But as I mentioned, we're going to chat about it as majority of the time with these post-game shows, I'll tend to, maybe try to spin things to make them, the most positive outcomes, or try to find some positive outcomes to kind of try to cling to in this one, where this one I feel like is a very frustrating one when you look at the long-term outlook of the BC Lions this season. I really feel like the recipe in which they lost is kind of indicative of the team that has been built in BC this season. You could even argue the past number of seasons, right? Where I feel like pretty productive offense for the most part. Special teams is more often than not hit or miss, and defense. That's probably the best way actually to describe the defense. Is more often than not the defense is hit or miss. More often than not, the special teams tends to be below average, I would say. So, as I said, more often than not on the post game reports, we try to keep it as positive as possible. After that one, I'm not sure how to spin things to cling to positively going into the bye week. So we'll chat about it. As I said, try to get a little bit of therapeutic, try to feel a little bit better about ourselves as Lions fans after this one. That being said, a absolute disappointing effort by the behalf of the BC Lions here this afternoon. So before we get into it, of course, if you guys would like today's video, comment down below. And of course, most importantly, subscribe to the channel, as we are, I believe, 3 subscribers away as of the time of this recording. Let me double check just to make sure we haven't passed that milestone already. But we are nearing the 500 subscriber milestone. We are 3 away, correct, as of the time of this recording. So if you guys could do us that big favor, head on down if you guys are checking this out on YouTube right now. Hit the subscribe button. When you hit the subscribe button, press the notification bell as well. You guys get notified every time we go upload a video or go live like today's post-game report. So other than that, with some of the other stuff, folks, kind of a little bit of the, peek behind the curtain, if you will, of why I was a little bit late on today's post-game report. Me and, or I guess I should say, my partnership with the BCFC and working for them this season, having to finish up to posts and whatnot, some content pieces for to be posted. I just posted the third and final Players to Watch series on our platform on the Canadian Football Fanatics Instagram account. Should be up on the BCFC account hopefully soon, but who knows when that might be. That being said, busy on that end, so that's kind of also a little bit of more kind of context for why we were unable to do a post-game report last week. We were on the call, as we said, I believe, on the weekly show and in some of our BCFC stuff. But I don't believe we were able to fill you guys in on a video because we didn't clue in to looking that far ahead from our previous post-game report in week number 10. So week 11, we did miss out. That being said, folks, we should be pretty good to go for the rest of the season, as not too many game days coincide with the BCFC, or I guess I should say the BC Lions, and majority of the time the VI Raiders. The other 6 teams I can kind of work with, being able to watch the games and afterwards. With the Raiders and the Raiders home game, me being the color analyst on broadcast this year, sometimes things aren't going to work out, and that was the case last week. So we will be back doing the post-game reports all for the rest of the season, and hopefully we have some more positivity to talk about. But let's get into this one, as this is a super duper sour taste to go into the bye with. I can only imagine inside that locker room, the long flight back across the country. That's going to be one that's probably for say, I'm sure those guys will maybe start to get a little bit, or let loose a little bit at least, But I would imagine that first 45 to an hour of that plane ride tonight is going to be very awkward, a lot of quiet. Guys play to themselves, frustrated that the Lions let this one go. So let's get into it from, I guess, three perspectives, or maybe, like I said, the losses kind of tend to you jump all around and tend to not be as coordinated, I guess you could say. That being said, let's start with the positives and get the positives out of the way. For those that are aware, though, too, and maybe going to comment down below before I do mention this, we are in a different location here today, so I am slightly thrown off every time I look at the camera, as we are actually in the kitchen today recording. Wanted to try something out, something new, as sometimes it's not as fun recording in our little makeshift studio. So I decided to pull up on the kitchen table for this post-game report to try a little bit of a new background, a new little backdrop. So let us know, folks, how you guys liking the post-game reports or the recordings from the kitchen of the McGarvey household. If not, I can go back, of course, too. We have a few locations here at the house. Of course, we got our little makeshift studio, as I mentioned, in our guest bedroom as of now, for as long as I have that at least. And then from time to time, I will record on in the living room, excuse me, when we're doing the weekly show, just to be a little bit comfy. But that being said, as I said, I wanted to also the windows and stuff like that, the little bit of a natural light that gets to come in here, as well as the kitchen window being open with a little bit of a breeze. It's kind of nice. So I wanted to switch things up on you guys. I'm curious to see if anybody noticed before I mentioned that in today's post-game report. So let's get into it. 52-34 for the Toronto Argonauts over the BC Lions. The Lions had an opportunity to win 3 straight ball games and are unable to do so. They let this one go, as it is I've mentioned it multiple times. I said you could describe it with multiple adjectives. I'm sure I'm going to mention frustrating and disappointing multiple times. The Lions had the opportunity now, as we talked about, I guess more specifically on the weekly show, right? With the Lions schedule coming up here, I believe they only have 4 Western Division opponents remaining on their schedule. That means an East-heavy schedule down the stretch here. While the West teams are beating up on each other, the Lions have an opportunity to stack wins against the opposite conference, and they're unable to do. Letting this one drop is a super frustrating outcome when you look at where they are in the standings and not being able to get to that 6th win with Winnipeg being around and Calgary. I know Calgary and Saskatchewan are kicking off, I guess, as we speak. But just disappointing when you think about the opportunity they had to get to that 6 wins, continue to kind of say, hey, we're here. We're going to be around. We're going to be that annoying team that's going to continue to fight. We started slow, but don't count us out when we could finish strong. And that could still be the case. They could still finish strong. But to be quite honest, to give you my 100% honest opinion, guys, I've said it now multiple times, and it's probably been almost like beating a dead horse. Not only I've said it on this platform for the post-game reports, the previews, all that sort of stuff, I've said it on our weekly show with Shane, Coach, and Blake. And I know Blake was probably a little bit more optimistic than myself this week. Having picked the BC Lions, right, I'm still optimistic. I still think they have some pieces to go on, a playoff run, get hot at the right time kind of thing. But that being said, they still have a lot of glaring holes in this roster, and that's starting with the defense. But we won't start with the defense on the post-game report here tonight, but I just think it's an incredibly strange kind of, and then maybe this is just who the Lions are this year. That's what I said on the weekly show of like it's hard to put your finger on one thing, because the Lions look good for a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then they look like a completely different team at times and get out of character, and it's the most mind-boggling, frustrating, most like just it's kind of strange, because it would be almost better if you could point to one thing that the Lions are, say, turning the football over too much, or the Lions are they can't get to the quarterback enough, right? Which maybe is all the case, right? It's multiple different things, which I think makes this even worse of a problem for the BC Lions. But I've said for probably dating back to a month now, every time the Lions take 1 or 2 steps forward, the Lions take 3 or 4 steps back. And that could just be the case for who this Lions team is this year. They could have the recipe and the products, the players to go on a run, and they just for whatever reason can't put it together for this season. And it's strange one to think because at times this team looks like that they play with the potential to be a top tier team this season. But then at times they look like completely shelled themselves. So let's get into the positives before we get into the negatives, because there's probably only a few positives if we're being honest. So let's get into it from a fast start standpoint. Probably the most points the BC Lions have put up in the first quarter this season. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if the 14 points they put up in this first quarter today is more than they've scored in the first quarter all season long. I'd be curious to know. Something that I haven't checked quite yet, but they finally get a fast start. As I said, the Argos start with possession of the football, go down, kick a field goal. Probably signs of what was to come from the Argos offense as well as the BC Lions defense. And that was that the BC Lions defense was Swiss cheese. Holes all over the place. Argos were able to march right down the field and thankfully not capitalizing a touchdown. They end up only getting settling for a field goal in that first drive. But as I said, the BC Lions come out offensively. They start very fast. I think that first drive was 4 plays, 70 yards, touchdown, bang, Javon Couture, just like that. Fantastic. Just what we've been looking for all season long. I kind of tweeted it very tongue-in-cheek of, man, who knew the Lions could score 2 touchdowns in the first quarter? Because they've been absolutely abysmal through 11 weeks, 10 games coming into this one. So they start fast. It was almost started to look, if I'm not mistaken, it almost started to look a little concerning because that second touchdown drive, if I'm not mistaken, was the Jeremiah Masoli where he gets stuffed 2 times at the goal line, ends up bringing in James Butler to punch it in. Javon Couture touchdown. James Butler touchdown. So, yes, indeed it was. Trying to... But it looks like it was just a quick 2-and-out of how the... Yeah, I guess the Stanley Berryhill play set them up into... But the Lions were able to, as I said, go down fairly quickly after that first touchdown, get a stop on defense, go down, drive the length of the field once again, get into scoring position down near the goal line. And they get a first and goal from the 1 yard line, the half-yard line. And they take a crack at him on first down. Jeremiah Masoli gets stuffed. Second down, he kind of slips and someone gets tangled up on his offensive lineman. Hard to put much blame on Jeremiah Masoli on that front. That being said, oh man, not to like pile on Jeremiah Masoli too much this season because I feel like people probably think I'm such a Jeremiah Masoli here, which I'm not. I love the person. You could even say, I don't know if I could go as far as say love the player, but liked the player back in the day for sure. Was easy to root for him as a player. And now it's just like every time he comes on the field, I'm like I'd almost rather keep Nathan out there in short yardage and risk those weird, not even going to say the R word. It's a very interesting one that Jeremiah Masoli I feel like needs to kind of ride off into the sunset this offseason, that the game has definitely passed him by, and being a short yardage backup quarterback is not the plan, brother. Go retire, go enjoy your family. And thankfully, James Butler is able to punch it in with a little bit of a Superman, Cam Newton type of dive there at the goal line to punch it in. The BC Lions go up 14-3. And basically, that's where the positives ended. Now, I'm not going to end quite yet. We'll continue to talk about James Butler, who had himself another strong performance, finishing the game with 11 carries, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 7.5 yards per carry. Unfortunate that just due to game script and stuff like that, you tend to take James Butler right out of the game. As soon as it became kind of a 14 to 10 point lead for sorry, Cole, third time's the charm there. Toronto, I don't know how many times I named. I believe I named Ottawa and then Saskatchewan before Toronto. Third time's the charm, though, as I said. as soon as the Argos built that lead, you're playing at the mercy of the Argos, and you're playing at the mercy of basically, you know, option 1A, 1B between Keon Hatcher, offensively between your skill position players, takes him right out of the game. 11 carries, 1 catch, 11 touches for your, as I said, probably shouldn't even say the second best. You should include him and Keon Hatcher together as 1A and 1B together as both the biggest threats on this Lions offense, as they both lead in receiving yards and rushing yards respectively in the CFL. Another big game for Keon Hatcher once again. We'll talk about him in a second. But it was just unfortunate for James Butler because I've doubled down. I've doubled, tripled, quadrupled at this point down. That and had a good exchange with Alan Cole, friend of mine, fellow Vancouver Islander, Argos fan. He kind of predicted, I believe, the Argos secondary would get sliced up, and it turns out to be it was the other way around. So Alan, if you're watching this one, hopefully you enjoyed. I always appreciate your banter back and forth, your comments, buddy. So keep them coming to my Twitter feed. I always enjoy when I see your name pop up. But you know, talking about James Butler, I doubled down of like, he said, there might be some people jokingly in Winnipeg that might disagree with that. And I said, I replied back to Alan, from a sample size, I 100% agree with the Winnipeggers that I think from a resume standpoint, from what you've done in your career, Brady Oliveira is the best running back in the CFL. There's no question about that. But on a year-to-year basis, and maybe who's playing the best this year specifically, that belongs to James Butler playing in BC this year, who was, I can't believe the situation he was in Hamilton last season, as well as thinking about possibly retiring this offseason. They talked about it on the broadcast. This brother has a ton of game left, a ton of juice left in the tank. I really hope the Lions are able to bring him back. I know it's crazy to think too. Gonna maybe let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but having a little bit of sources in that organization, talking to a few people within the BC Lions organization, there were some rumblings, there were some rumors that possibly, maybe looking towards maybe going a little bit younger at the running back position this upcoming season before the year. Of nothing against James Butler specifically, but possibly with some younger, cheaper options, right? With how the team was built, as you're seeing maybe with some of the holes on the roster, maybe having to spend elsewhere because of that. The Lions ended up going with, I feel like, maybe the right decision. It's hard to say the right decision as of now because the season's not over, but could it ultimately been the wrong decision because you weren't able to effectively maybe add another piece or two on your defense, or even a piece, right, where you could have sacrificed that running back money for, say, another defensive lineman, somebody in the secondary, etc. So unfortunately, that one there. But in my humble opinion, I feel like James Butler is the best running back in the CFL right now, and that is not even a little bit of a slight against Brady Oliveira. So the next positive, it's got to be the contributions from the receiving core. Keon Hatcher, once again, you could argue that he is the best receiver in the CFL currently. And I definitely am here to hear the argument of Demonte Coxey, Kenny Lawler, Geno's quietly doing Geno things. I'm here to have those conversations for sure. But what Hatch is doing right now, bona fide number one wide receiver for BC right now, and that's not a slight at, and shouldn't be held against Justin McInnis because he got upstaged or his job got taken over by Keon Hatcher. That could have very well happened last season, and McInnis wouldn't have maybe had as big of a season if Hatch wasn't 100%, or excuse me, if Hatch was 100%, which is very clear. Hatch was working himself up to getting to 100%, working through the the mental grind of coming back from a major injury, as well as maybe he just wanted to be out there because he saw a guy like TJ Lee come back on the field so quick. Maybe he wanted to, TJ's back on the field, I got to get back out on the field just that much quicker. Where maybe he should have just sat her down and recovered for as much time as he needed. Not to say that he rushed by any means. That's maybe feels like what I'm feels a little like I'm implying, which it is, but the difference we're seeing is almost night and day. You can definitely tell Hatch is a veteran as he doesn't have maybe pull away speed that he once used to, or get away speed, to maybe take to some of these long balls and some of these passes to the house for touchdowns. But that being said, Keon Hatcher has been playing phenomenal this season. It's been fantastic to watch him get back to the level of play he's been at this season, and continue to command respect against defenses, command attention against defenses, open up other players in the receiving core. Speaking about the receiving core, Javon Catoy had himself a pretty good day until I know he looked like he got a little bit nicked, and it was actually a pretty pleasant surprise to see when you look at the receiving core here that the rest of the receivers pretty much finished around the 50 yards receiving mark, which is a good thing to see when all the receivers are kind of eating. The defense isn't able to key on one guy. Now, the one downside of that is that you put up 34 points and the defense gave up 50, for crying out loud. So that's a bummer. You're not going to win too many games when you give up 50 points, that's for sure, especially when you score 34 points as an offense. You probably think that's probably good. Like, you should win 80% of those ball games, opposed to the, every 10 games you play, 8 are going to be in, 35 points or less. The other 2 maybe get to 40 and you lose. You're pretty comfortable in that. That being said, long term, not comfortable with the BC Lions defense. But Hatch, fantastic, continues to show why he is wide receiver 1. Javon Catoy, 3 receptions, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. The second touchdown was a phenomenal effort to get in the end zone by Javon Catoy. Caught the ball probably about 10 yards short of the end zone. Hurdled the defender, was able to brush off another defender's attempted tackle, and was able to get in the end zone before being pushed out of the bounds just past the end zone pylon for his second touchdown. Javon Catoy is a guy who's been quietly having himself a solid season. He continues his production halfway through the season. He'll finish with about 800 or so yards. Could be close to around a career high if his pace upticks at all. He could start to come into contention with being around 1,000-yard guy. But that being said, with the amount of mouths there is to feed in the receiving core, it's hard to think about that one. So other than that, as I said, the receivers were pretty productive as a whole today. Aiden Eberhardt, 458, had some big time catches in there as well. And then Justin McKinnis, maybe not as efficient as you'd like, but another 57 yards receiving. He continues to play better, I wouldn't say play better, just start to maybe get some looks from Nathan, where before we'd seen not too many targets, throughout games. Now, 9 targets this one, only 3 receptions, a tough one there. Nathan and him still trying to get on the same page. I know it's been an interesting one from Nathan. We'll talk about Nathan, I guess, here next to transition into that one. Another 20 of 31, 326, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception from Nate. The 1 interception, one that I'm sure Nate would like to have back, as it was the pick 6 for the Toronto Argonauts. The one that kind of turned things on their head, as the Lions hit a big play, gets called back for penalty. I believe it was the very next play. Nate ends up throwing the interception. As I also have said on the weekly show, it's crazy to think that, I know this sounds, folks, before you jump down my throat or get in the comments, do a little research about me or get on my personal social media platforms. You probably can't find, it's hard to find any bigger Nathan Rourke supporters or fans out there. But it's hard to think that Nathan Rourke has played this well, but still hasn't played his best. And I don't really think it's hard to say. It maybe sounds a little bit of like I'm over exaggerating by saying he hasn't even been close to playing his best game yet. But I kind of want to say, like, he hasn't even been close to playing his best game, I feel like, yet, where Nathan's going to continue to hopefully get better over the long season. I feel like for whatever reason, the high throws have came up more than ever before, number one, and it just are weird things for sure when Nathan's such a accurate passer. And something that I'm curious if I ever am able to have an interaction with Rob Williams or Nathan in person, if I'm lucky to, as I mentioned, to just kind of maybe pick their brains of something that they're going to maybe work on in the off season, or what can they maybe led into something like that. But that being said, as I said with Nathan, 20 of 31, 326, 2 tutties. He's been passing since he returned from injury, I believe, with 343 yards a game. Again, over 300 yards, so was another good performance from Nathan Rourke. but not a great performance or a, superstar leading performance, which is not a slight at Nathan. I think the other thing is as well is he's also not getting a lot of complimentary football, where his defense maybe is out there and you know he feels probably like he has to score on every drive, right? And sometimes you press, you push balls into tighter windows than you probably should. So it's an unfortunate one for Nathan. It's a bummer, but I put little to no blame on Nathan for his. He's a human being as well, right? So this maybe feels like I'm maybe to take you into my head a little bit, guys, of like, yes, I'm saying this, but maybe think about like off camera. Am I being a little bit hard on Nathan? I always think no, I'm not being too hard on Nathan because I always think of myself being hard on Nathan. What about Nathan? He's obviously his biggest critic as himself, so I would think Nathan's going to be just as hard as himself as well. So I'm curious to see if Nathan's able to put it together down the stretch. What it's going to look like at the right time of year. If you're able to, I've said it multiple times, getting hot post Labor Day, you gotta the saying of, oh, real football doesn't start till after Labor Day. That's not necessarily true. I don't necessarily believe in that. It's putting yourself into position at Labor Day for you to get hot at the right time post Labor Day. That's what the Lions have an opportunity to do, and it'll be led by the BC Lions offense and Nathan Rourke. But he's going to have to definitely look a tad crisper, and I think that'll come with hopefully the relief of his other units playing better around him, special teams, defense. And I think that kind of leads me into ending with the positive, which is basically the offense, and talking about the negatives from here on out. If we want to keep this one a little bit short, we'll maybe go for another 50 minutes and we'll get out of here. Let's talk about the decision making by one Buck Pierce. I think it's been pretty questionable. And you got to maybe cut him a little bit of slack as a first-year head coach, and he's still working through a lot of things as a play caller and as a head coach, right, where he's dealing with all those decisions himself. It's not solo, it's not specifically offensive coordinator duties. You're responsible for all of the head coaching, roles and stuff like that, where he's probably not as used to it, right? And still getting used to those game day interactions, going through the challenge system, all that sort of stuff, as well as trying to talk to his guys on offense, adjust, all that sort of stuff. Now, where the first one starts from me, and I probably agree with this one, is with the throwing of the challenge flag, the pass interference on Patrice Rene. I know there was some people that felt different, especially on the broadcast. I believe Coach Lapo definitely felt different, that he thought, I think he joked of like, somebody keep Patrice Rene far away from the sidelines after that one. That being said, I agree with Farhan Lalji tweeted during the game that he thought Coach Buck Pierce should have challenged that one. He thought it was within 5 yards that the contact happened, as well as he thought the contact happened before the ball was even released by Nick Arbuckle. So I tended to agree. You can go back and check that one out. I especially agree with it happened within 5 yards of contact. And it also, I know Coach Lapo thought it kind of looked more like it was a pull. It definitely looked more like a shove or a kind of a forearm shiver, where he kind of just knocked Unger off balance more so than anything. So it was an unfortunate one, and maybe you could argue, accidental pass interference, whatever you want to call. I thought that was fine one by Buck Pierce. Where it starts for me is the Lions getting the ball back with, I believe, 30 seconds to go in the first half, and should absolutely look to go score and get into field goal range. The absolutely mind-boggling part here is that the Lions get 10 free yards to start. So they start at the 40-yard line. Gifted 10 free yards by too many men on the field by the Toronto Argonauts. And you know what Coach Buck Pierce does? He gets the offense to kneel out the half. Unflippin' believable, man. Unflippin' believable. Coward. That's cowardly shit. To be just 100% honest right now, guys. 30 seconds left? And maybe it wasn't quite 30 seconds. It could have been 27, 25, around there. The play clock stopped after every play. You didn't need to have your timeouts at your disposal, excuse me. That's at least another 2 plays and a spike to get into field goal range. Points were at a premium as the Argos just took the 28-21 lead. You got to know KYP, know your personnel. KYG, know your game. You're in a shootout, Buck. You're an offensive damn coordinator. And the frustration is going to lead into I'm sure you guys can hear by the tone of my voice how I'm coming off now. But the frustration is going to lead into the other decisions down the road that he makes. So that's number one that we have in frustrating coaching decisions from Buck Pierce on tonight's game. Decides to kneel the ball out to end the half with his team. Pick up. I know Sean White doesn't have the biggest leg. Pick up 25, 30 yards. 2 15-yard plays. Like, you're not asking for huge chunk plays. Yes, they're medium, you're going over the middle of the field, that kind of thing. Medium range. You're not asking to go downtown. Couldn't believe it. So the next coaching decisions that were ultimately frustrating were the fact that the BC Lions ended up settling for a field goal from the 3-yard line because Buck Pierce is too afraid to go for it, which would have been in the third quarter, if I'm not mistaken. The first drive of the game, or first drive of the third quarter, excuse me. Lions down 28-21. As I mentioned, they are too cowardly to go for it. And then they drive it down the field with an impressive first drive to start the half. And instead of going for it on third down from the 3-yard line, they kick the ball from the 3-yard line. Now, where some people might agree is, if third and goal from the 3-yard line, so you have to go 3 yards as opposed to 1 or 2, right? A little bit of a farther distance. Now, as I just said, KYG, know your game. I should have said KYDG. Know your damn game, Buck Pierce. You are not winning this football game with 3s versus 6s. First of all, how the first half went. Both offenses putting up points. Both offenses looking pretty crisp. Secondly, have you not seen what the Toronto Argonauts have been this year? Their record is what the record is. But quietly, Nick Arbuckle has been very effective, very efficient as a quarterback. Maybe I shouldn't say efficient. But Nick Arbuckle hasn't been the problem in Toronto this season. Their defense is cheeks. Case in point by the 34 points that the BC Lions put up. But Nick Arbuckle has not been the issue in Toronto this year. So that's why I know people are a little bit frustrated. Oh, we made Nick Arbuckle look like a hero. And it's like, no, well, Nick Arbuckle's been looking quietly pretty decent all season. And we talked about that on the postgame show. Like, the narrative behind Nick Arbuckle post Grey Cup, where it was, he got gifted, he got handed most outstanding player of the Grey Cup, versus now where it's a total 360. He's earned himself an opportunity down the line to at the very least, be around as a 1B or a backup somewhere else for another number of years. Because as I said on the weekly show, he was out of the league last year before being picked up by the Argos, excuse me. But Buck Pierce, know what game you're in, brother. You're an offensive-minded coach. The Argos have been putting up points all season long. Their defense hasn't been very good, and neither has yours. So the faith behind your defense of, let's kick the field goal, we'll send the defense out there, the defense is going to get stopped, we'll trot the offense right back out there. Your defense hasn't proven to you once to trust that. So to do it over and over again, is that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insane to me. So Buck Pierce kicks the field goal. I'm sure is all giddy about it. 28-24 ball game. Okay, sweet. Well, guess what? Your defense sucks. They gave up a touchdown immediately. Immediately, they gave up a touchdown. 1, 2, 3, 4 plays later, they gave up a touchdown. And the BC Lions go on a 2-and-out And then a few drives later, I believe it was maybe in the fourth quarter, could have been actually. Correct, it was. So at that point, the football game would have been 42-30. It would have been a 12-point football game. So in Canadian rules, as we know, well within reach with a quarter to go. The Lions start with possession of the football, start the fourth quarter, and they drive right down the field. And they get to a 3rd and 3 from the 6-yard line. So an opportunity to pick up a first down, don't have to get a touchdown, to give themselves a 1st and goal from the 3 or closer. And I'm going to double down and say it once again, because I doubled down on Twitter, of how stupid of a decision it was by Buck Pierce to double down on such an idiotic decision to trot your field goal kicker out. Down 12 points when your defense has given up 40 points through 3 quarters. Not sure the reasoning behind that one. Not too sure how you conjured that one up in your kind of brief discussions in your mind. Hopefully that it went on. I sure hope the discussion there was some. Your mind was talking, because he does it again down 12. Make the field goal. You're down 9, and guess what happens? The very next play, the Argos score a touchdown. A 70-yard touchdown the very next play. A 70-yard touchdown the very next play. As I said, number one, your defense has sucked all year, giving you zero reason to believe in them. Nick Arbuckle hasn't been the problem, neither is the offense in Toronto. And no, the game you're playing in, and Buck Pierce ignores all of them. All of them. Unbelievably stupid. Unfucking believably stupid. Just to be quite honest with you guys. To be quite transparent. As you guys can see, we're on a little bit of a different energy here tonight. As I said, I try to spin things a little bit, try to come up with the best positive narratives, or try to cling to some positives. There's none. There's none other than the few I talked about, and then the offense is top 3 in the CFL. Other than that, your defense sucks, your special teams is inconsistent, and your head coach is a first-year coach who's going through a ton of growing pains. I'm not going to say Coach Buck Pierce sucks. He's a first-year head coach. He's still going through growing pains. He's learning how to be a head coach. I get that. But we can definitely talk about those growing pains. And there's been plenty, because this has been the first time that coaching decisions have come up to hurt the BC Lions in multiple ways. Not having any timeouts 2 minutes into the second half is utterly fucking ridiculous. Now, yeah, you could argue, yeah, the situations leading up to that put you into that situation. And as I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of them. Some of the challenges I thought should have went BC Lions' way. They didn't. That's the case. But that being said, for Buck Pierce to double down on that decision is so fucking stupid. I honestly couldn't believe it. Honestly couldn't believe it. Honest to God. So my last thing, as basically that kind of brings us to the Argos basically running out the time, the rest of the fourth quarter pretty much from there. Lions were unable to do anything else from that point on. Now the defense. 52 flipping points. Swiss cheese. This defense is pathetic. And that's probably the nicest way to put it. And for multiple years now, this defense has need to be retooled. You could argue, did somewhat retooling this year. It didn't work. And to hire a retread in Mike Benavides, what did I say earlier? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? You had this guy in the building already, seen what happened as leader of your franchise, Not only has he been a defensive coordinator as a long-term member of the BC Lions, he's been a head coach. Showing you already. But no, we bring him back. Not only that, you bring back Ryan Phillips, who I said basically got scapegoated last year. Probably shouldn't have been let go because of how pathetic his team was, his unit was, excuse me. That being said, how at this point, maybe it's the message and the players, because clearly neither's working. I'll tell you right now, Christophe Boyou, who could be gone, Deontay Williams, Robert Carter, Matthew Betts. That's probably it who should be coming back. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more. Micah Alway, fantastic player. He's been fantastic to watch this season. If he's leading the CFL in tackles by that much, as Nick Anderson and who else is in that defense? Why am I freaking drawing a blank right now? Niles Morgan, excuse me, said last year, we don't ever want to lead the CFL in tackles again because that means we're on the field too damn much. Case in point, for Mike Alway leading the tackles by a landslide. He's gotten more opportunities than everybody, probably by double. Of course, that's probably a little bit of a over exaggeration on my part. That being said, it's still absolutely true by how much they've been on the field. Mike Alway, bringing back for some veteran presence, I'd be into that for sure. If not, let's look to go elsewhere. Let's do a whole retool of this defense because the pass rush sucks. For being honest, sucks. Run defense sucks. Pass defense sucks. Love GP. Been saying it since probably what, week 4? Probably should have been 1 year too early opposed to 1 year too late. We're seeing what happens here. And as I said with GP, it's not a guarantee. The grass is always green on the other side. So it could be banging the table for all these changes, and nothing could change. It could arguably get worse. But as I said, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that's what the Lions defense has done in the last, 3 years, 4 years, you could argue? The same core group, and they haven't got it done. So, and, even more frustrating decisions, you could argue their best player defensively in Deontay Williams. I know ratio, roster, and construction comes into this play, or comes into this decision. Your best player defensively, Deontay Williams, before he got switched over to halfback, playing at Sam, was playing fantastic this season. All over the football, making multiple highlight plays a game where you notice, oh, holy who was that? Number 9 again? Now you moved him in the secondary, and he's been not a liability, but definitely worse. Haven't noticed him as much. Not making as many impact plays, if not any now, per game. So you're hopeful for maybe it was a win-win. It was a net lose-lose. Maybe I shouldn't say that one, but that's maybe being a little bit too negative, because Pearson has been fine at Sam. Donnie Williams has been fine at playing half. He hasn't been as productive as playing Sam. That's another unfortunate, I don't know if it's a mistake, but missed opportunity. But that being said, the defense, oh my God, this has just got to be a major retool. As I said with Gary Peters, love Gary Peters and everything he's done for us, but it's time to just try to find the new next Gary Peters. Who's going to be the next CB1 of this group? Robert Carter, shown some promising things. He's still struggling at times. Ronald Kent, excuse me, hits and misses. As I said, Christophe Boyou is going to be an interesting one that hopefully we're able to keep him around with, Jackson Finley being this regime's draft pick. Hopefully we don't let Christophe Boyou walk because he's been a phenomenal player this season for us. Matthew Betts, I think, as I said, it's a tough one to talk about Betts in a full conversation of he's played well, but he hasn't also maybe lived up to the contract for sure, is a reasonable conversation to have. but I also think it's about who else is around him, and it's not good enough. Siakam, I've kind of seen enough of the 1 or 2 games he shows up for, and then he's completely invisible for a month time. Quebec Toure, there was rumblings coming out of camp that he was going to be a game changer. Probably case in point to our offensive line, although you could argue our strongest point of the offensive line is our tackles. Jarrell Broxton got to stand up for him for a little bit more, that he deserves to be in some All-Star award conversations, as he's been phenomenal this year. But other than that, I mean, the defensive line, I know Jonah Tobias has had stretches, as well as Dwayne Hendricks. They've been quiet. Covington, he's a reserve. So, my opinion, totally retool, reshuffle, whatever you want to say, the defense, offense. I don't mind the receiving core, to be honest. Quarterback's fine. JB's fine. As I said, the tackles, our center, probably fine. Try to take a swing at upgrading at guard. Other than that, absolutely attack defensively in the offseason. But that'll be a show for the offseason, folks. I think that's going to be pretty good for our post-game report here tonight in a disastrous, disappointing 52-34 loss to the Toronto Argonauts on behalf of the BC Lions. If you guys got through this one with me, I wouldn't even say enjoyed, because this one was a frustrating one too, but if you guys did enjoy, you guys always enjoy kind of some of my perspective, some of our conversation after BC Lions games, please feel free to leave a like on today's video, comment down below on today's video, let us know where you guys are tuning in from, as well as how you guys are feeling. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel, folks. Hopefully by the time this video is over, now we have reached 500 subscribers, or hopefully by the time we record to you guys next time, we are already at 500 subscribers. The Lions are going to go into a bye week now, and this should be a super sour taste, as they're going to go into Labor Day with egg on their face and nobody to blame but themselves. Coming out of Labor Day, though, with a huge opportunity to go back-to-back in Ottawa, and then at home versus Ottawa. Got to stack 2 wins. Got to try to get those wins that are very crucial to try to get to 7 wins. But Ottawa's going to be desperate as well. They're trying to stay alive over there in the East and trying to get back on the right track themselves. So it is Saturday, folks, and games are going to kick off here in about an hour or so, and actually about 40 minutes, actually, I believe the first game is going to kick off. But as I said, my partnership with the British Columbia Football Conference, a pipeline, a feeder system for the BCFC, as there's multiple, for the CGFL, as there's multiple former BCFC alumni. Andrew Harris being the one notable one, Javon Katoy in this one, Sean White, Jacob Bond, you name it. But the first one is going to be at Hillside Stadium at 6 o'clock tonight. Prince George taking on the Kamloops Broncos. Next one is at Starlight Stadium down in Langford. The VI Raiders traveling to take on the West Shore Rebels. 7 o'clock kickoff tonight. And the last game is another 7 o'clock kickoff at Exhibition Stadium in Chilliwack, when the Valley Huskers host the Okanagan Sun. If you are in Kamloops, West Shore, or Valley, get out to the park, support your local teams. If not, check out BCFC TV. Great way to consume the games if you're unable to get out to the park, or if you're living in opposite cities, or even around the country, for those that may be listening around the country. Any BI Raiders home games, of course, you'll be able to listen to myself, yours truly, here, as I am the, as I said, color commentator for every BI Raiders home game this upcoming season. That has been a ton of fun, as well as been covering the BCFC this season. So we have been busy, folks. But of course, we still cover the big guys, the BC Lions, the pros as well. So it was fun to get back on here and talk a little bit of BC Lions here tonight, doing a post-game report. Although so this one was frustrating, it is always a, got to be thankful, got to be grateful for the opportunity, as I'm sitting in my living room right now talking football. Sitting in my kitchen talking football right now. It could be a lot worse. Life could be a lot worse, but we are blessed. We are grateful. Hope you guys enjoyed. That is coming off a 52-34, very disappointing loss on behalf of the BC Lions. The BC Lions get into their bye week now and then come out with a home versus Ottawa Redblacks. So we'll see you guys in 2 weekends' time. We'll be back with another BC Lions post-game report. Until then, hope you guys enjoy our content. As I mentioned, subscribe to the channel. When you guys subscribe, press the notification bell. You guys get notified every time we go live or upload any video on the channel. Hope you guys enjoy the weekend. We'll catch you guys in the next one.